February 20, 1945. Northern Sector Iwo Jima. Japanese defensive positions observed as unfamiliar American tanks advanced through the volcanic ash. Black smoke trailed behind them, not from damage, but something else entirely. The turret of one vehicle turned toward a concrete bunker. Instead of a main gun, there was a modified barrel with a nozzle. Then came the sound, a mechanical hiss, like compressed air escaping. In an instant, a torrent of burning fuel fired across 150 yards of volcanic ash, engulfing the nearby pillbox in a thick cloud of napalm. The screams lasted just seconds. Japanese defenders hurried to field telephones to report what they had seen. 8 modified Sherman tanks, equipped with flamethrowers, weapons that the Japanese defenders had never faced before. These weapons would change the nature of combat in the Pacific War's most intense battle. What Yamada did not know was that these machines were the result of months of secret development at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. Navy engineers worked around the clock to make these top-secret modifications. This was a blend of American industrial might and the urgent needs of the battlefield. One Marine battalion commander would call it the best single weapon of the operation. The Battle of Iwo Jima had reached its second day. The mathematics of death were about to change significantly. These 8 tanks would account for over 30% of Japanese casualties through incineration, a number that would haunt survivors on both sides for years. The Imperial Japanese Army had spent an entire year turning Iwo Jima into the strongest defensive position in the Pacific. 8 square miles of volcanic rock became a fortress that defied traditional military tactics. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, appointed to lead the island's defense in June 1944, understood clearly that he could not defeat the Americans. His mission was different. He aimed to make the capture of Iwo Jima so costly that the United States would reconsider invading the Japanese homeland. Kuribayashi had studied the failures at Saipan, Peleliu, and the Philippines. Traditional Japanese defensive tactics, engaging the enemy head-on and launching massive banzai charges, had proven disastrous against American firepower. The general made a revolutionary choice that broke with centuries of samurai tradition. There would be no heroic charges and no warriors seeking an honorable death in battle. Instead, his 21,000 men would engage in combat from beneath the ground. Iwo Jima would become a hidden killing ground. By February 1945, Japanese engineers had completed 11 miles of tunnels connected to what would be a total of 17 miles. The finished sections went 7 stories deep into the volcanic rock. They had carved out 5,000 caves and underground chambers, many large enough to accommodate 300 to 400 soldiers. The landscape was dotted with 1,500 fortified positions, concrete bunkers with walls 4 feet thick, reinforced with steel rods from old construction sites, crowned every strategic high point. Each position was carefully placed to ensure overlapping fields of fire. Every inch of the island could be targeted by Japanese guns concealed behind steel doors that opened only for firing and then sealed again against counterattacks. The tunnel system itself was an engineering feat. Ventilation shafts, disguised as natural rock formations, provided fresh air. There were underground hospitals with operating theaters prepared to assist 400 wounded, communications centers, buried 75 feet below the surface, coordinated defenses through miles of telephone wire. Storage chambers contained enough rice, water, and ammunition to last through a 2-month siege. The largest underground facility beneath Hill 382 held a chamber 50 meters long and 20 meters wide, spacious enough for an entire battalion. Kuribayashi arranged his forces with precise calculations. The southern area around Mount Suribachi was assigned a semi-independent command led by Colonel Konehiko Atsuchi. His 2,000 men operated artillery positions that could target the landing beaches. Meanwhile, the northern plateau, offering the best defensive terrain, housed the majority of Japanese forces, 15,000 men under Kuribayashi's direct command. Between these strongholds was a central reserve of 4,000 troops, ready to support any threatened area through the tunnel network. The Americans understood that Iwo Jima would be tough to conquer. However, the complete scope of Kuribayashi's underground fortress was hidden from aerial observation. Over 74 consecutive days of bombing had released 6,800 tons of explosives on the island. Naval bombardment had sent 22,000 shells crashing down on Japanese positions. American planners assumed these efforts had taken out most of the resistance. They envisioned the island's defenses significantly weakened. would fall in 5 days. They were completely mistaken. The initial bombardment had taken out fewer than 200 of the 1,500 fortified positions. The tunnel system remained mostly undamaged. Most Japanese soldiers were hardly affected by the massive display of firepower. 5 months before the invasion, at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii, Colonel George F. Terr Unmar gathered a team that would change armored warfare in the Pacific. Unmar, a dedicated Army officer with 44 years of service, led the United States Army Chemical Warfare Service's most classified project in the Central Pacific region, known as CNPAC. His goal was to create a weapon system that could neutralize Japanese caves and bunkers, which had resisted conventional weaponry. Initially, the colonel's team was small, consisting only of the 43rd Chemical Laboratory Company. However, Unmar recognized the scale of his challenge and needed exceptional talent. He requested 25 men from the 117th Naval Construction Battalion, whose mechanical skills and engineering expertise were famous across the Pacific. He also included personnel from the 5th Marine Tank Battalion and the 81st Ordnance Company, forming a unique joint service team united by a single mission: to build a weapon that could force the Japanese out of their caves. Leading the technical development were machinist mate First Class A. Riker and electrician's mate Second Class Joseph Clay. These two men, whose names might not make the headlines, would create innovations that saved thousands of American lives. They brought practical battlefield experience from earlier island campaigns. They had witnessed Marines perish while assaulting fortified positions that artillery could not breach. They understood the real issue was not the firepower itself, but how to effectively apply that firepower against an enemy hiding underground. The task was significant. Past attempts to attach flamethrowers to tanks had resulted in mixed outcomes. The Army's early designs were basic modifications essentially. Portable flamethrowers bolted onto tank hulls. The Canadian Ronson system, which the Marines had procured 30 units of, could only reach 60 to 80 yards, and had a fuel capacity that allowed for only 30 to 40 seconds of fire. These weapons were maintenance hazards that often malfunctioned in combat, with failure rates surpassing 40% in the field. The first significant progress came with the M3 light tank modifications, known as Satan tanks. The initial creation from the 43rd Chemical Company, called Hells of Fire, showcased the idea's promise but also highlighted serious shortcomings. The turret could only turn 180 degrees. The flame gun had limited elevation. Most importantly, the light tank's thin armor left it exposed to Japanese 47mm anti-tank guns, which were common in defensive areas. Unmar's team sought a better solution. Through military channels reaching the highest levels, Unmar communicated directly with Admiral Chester Nimitz's staff. They found 8 M4A3 Sherman medium tanks available for conversion. These tanks weighed 35 tons and were powered by a 500-horsepower Ford GAAV 8 engine, with armor thickness ranging from 25mm to 76mm. Their standard armament included a 75mm main gun and several .30 caliber machine guns. The Shermans had demonstrated their toughness in European battles and had the armor necessary to withstand Japanese anti-tank fire. However, acquiring the tanks was just the start. The true innovation emerged when Reicher and Kell decided to merge the best features of 3 existing flamethrower systems, the British Ronson, the Navy Mark I, and German designs captured from North Africa. Working long hours in the Hawaiian heat and taking turns resting beside their welding gear, the construction battalion began creating something groundbreaking. The weapon they developed, named CBH-1, or Construction Battalion Hawaii 1, marked a major advancement in flamethrower technology. Its installation required 150 pounds of welding rod and 1,100 electrical connections, each essential for the weapon's operation. The conversion process involved 1,200 man-hours per tank, with 150 parts specially crafted by construction battalion metal workers. Each conversion cost between $20,000, which is about $360,000 in today's money. The technical specifications were remarkable. The CBH-1 functioned at 300 pounds per square inch of pressure, 3 times that of earlier designs. Its maximum range reached 150 yards with a thickened fuel mixture, nearly 3 times the range of portable flamethrowers. This fuel blend, a precisely measured combination of diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm thickener developed by the 43rd Chemical Laboratory, burned at 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. The system could sustain continuous fire for up to 80 seconds, though the recommended usage was in bursts of 2 to 3 seconds to save fuel and ensure accuracy. The flamethrower took the place of the tank's main gun. This change allowed for a full range of 270 degrees and adjustments from -10 to +35 degrees using the tank's current fire control systems. The gunner could aim the flamethrower as precisely as a traditional cannon, using the same periscope and controls. This setup meant that tank crews needed very little additional training to use the new weapon effectively. However, the most significant advancement was psychological. The modified tanks were painted in the standard Marine Corps olive drab. There were no special markings and no indications of their deadly purpose. To Japanese observers, they looked like ordinary Sherman tanks until they opened fire. By that point, it was too late. The fuel system was an engineering marvel. The main fuel tanks contained 290 gallons of thickened fuel, plus another 10 gallons of unthickened fuel for ignition. A separate pressure tank held compressed nitrogen, which was preferred over compressed air because nitrogen would not support combustion if the tank was struck. The entire system was designed with numerous safety features to prevent the explosive failures that plagued previous flamethrower vehicles. Inside the command bunker beneath Hill 382, General Kuribayashi arranged his defenses based on precise mathematical calculations. Kill zones overlapped at specific angles. Artillery spotters hidden in spider holes could direct fire onto any grid coordinate in seconds. Machine gun nests were placed to create interlocking fields of fire that would funnel American forces into pre-registered artillery targets. The general's defensive philosophy was straightforward: conserve ammunition, remain underground, and make the Americans come to you. His standing orders were clear. He instructed every commander to avoid dying until they had killed 10 Americans. Large-scale counterattacks were not allowed. Each soldier was told to hold their position until they were overrun, then to fight with grenades, bayonets, and ultimately their bare hands. Simple math indicated that with 21,000 defenders, they could inflict 210,000 casualties, far more than the total American invasion force. Japanese defensive strategy had significantly evolved since earlier battles in the Pacific. Intelligence reports from Saipan and Peleliu highlighted the vulnerabilities of flamethrower operators. The weapon's telltale black smoke from burning diesel made the operators easy targets. The limited range of the weapon forced operators to put themselves in harm's way. In earlier battles, the casualties among portable flamethrower users exceeded 70%. Some units even faced losses of 92% among their flame operators. Special training focused on countering flamethrower tactics. Machine gunners were instructed to focus their fire on any soldier carrying the distinctive twin tanks of a portable flamethrower. Snipers received extra ammunition to target these flame operators specifically. Infantry units practiced rushing flamethrower positions with bayonets, taking advantage of the weapon's limited range, where the operator could not defend adequately. However, Japanese planning assumed that flamethrowers would only be carried by infantry. The idea of armored flamethrowers, which could advance on fortified positions while protected by armor and delivering precise incendiary attacks at long range, was never thought of. The Japanese defensive positions, designed to withstand artillery and aerial bombardment, had no special defenses against burning petroleum that could seep through gaps and ventilation shafts. This oversight would lead to devastating consequences. What were once considered Japan's strongest fortifications became death traps against weapons that could turn solid defenses into crematoriums. On February 19th, the 8 M4A3 flamethrower tanks landed on Iwo Jima's beaches, arriving alongside the regular Sherman tanks from the 4th and 5th Tank Battalions. The official designation from the Marine Corps was M4A3R5. Although various documents refer to them with different names, including POA-CWS-H1 and CB-MK1. They came ashore in the fifth wave around 10 o'clock in the morning after the beaches had been somewhat secured. Navy orders required them to remain in reserve during the initial assault. Marine commanders wanted to assess the tactical situation before deploying these critical and irreplaceable assets. The tanks were distributed carefully, with 4 assigned to the 4th Marine Division and 4 to the 5th Marine Division. Each tank was given a number for identification ranging from 431 to 438. Some crews painted nicknames on their vehicles, such as Hellfire, Corkscrew, and Blaze of Glory. Most, however, remained unmarked, their grim purpose concealed until the moment of engagement. For the first 24 hours, the Flamethrower tanks sat idle near the beach, while Marines suffered heavy losses, trying to advance against unseen Japanese positions. The volcanic ash reached up to a man's calf with each step, making movement for the infantry exhausting. Traditional tactics were failing dramatically. Naval gunfire could not penetrate bunkers that lay 10 feet beneath volcanic rock and concrete. Artillery shells detonate harmlessly against positions built to endure direct hits from 16-inch naval guns. Marine riflemen found themselves attacking fortifications as solid as mountains. The first day's casualties were staggering, with 2,420 Marines killed or injured. The beach quickly became a killing field as Japanese artillery, which had been hidden, began to fire on the concentrated landing forces. Sherman tanks that tried to advance inland became stuck in the ash or were destroyed by concealed anti-tank guns. By nightfall, the invading forces had only advanced less than 700 yards from the beach, far from the D-Day goals of capturing the first airfield. On the morning of February 20th, the situation was desperate. The 21st Marine Regiment was trapped while trying to cross Motoyama Airfield No. 1. 3 concrete pillboxes dominated the approach, their overlapping machine gun fire creating a kill zone 200 yards wide. 2 rifle companies had already been decimated in frontal assaults. The regiment faced 35% casualties in under 48 hours. Lieutenant Colonel William Duplantis, who commanded the 3rd Battalion of the 21st Marines, made a pivotal decision that would change the course of the battle. He called for the Flamethrower tanks. At 2:20 p.m., the 1st M4A3 Flamethrower tank entered combat. Tank number 431, led by Staff Sergeant Robert Meza, a veteran of Saipan and Tinian, moved toward the Japanese positions at an angle, using destroyed Japanese aircraft for cover. To Japanese observers, it looked like just another standard Sherman trying the same unsuccessful assault. The tank approached carefully. Meza knew that surprise would be their only advantage. Inside the tank, the 5-man crew readied themselves for action. Driver Private First Class James Morrison navigated the vehicle through the volcanic ash that threatened to immobilize the 35-ton tank. Assistant Driver Private Robert Chen operated the bow machine gun, on the lookout for Japanese infantry. Loader Corporal Anthony Vitelli monitored the fuel pressure gauges, noting a reading of 300 psi, which was optimal for maximum range. Gunner Corporal Thomas Carlson peered through his periscope, tracking the nearest pillbox. At 125 yards from the nearest pillbox, Meza gave the command, "Gunner, Flamethrower." Pillbox, fire. The CBH-1 flamethrower roared to life, making a sound described by witnesses as the devil's own blowtorch. A stream of thickened napalm fuel oil shot through the air, propelled by compressed nitrogen. The burning liquid hit the pillbox opening with deadly precision, splashing through the machine gun port and pouring inside like lava. The impact was immediate and terrifying. Temperatures soared past 1200 degrees Fahrenheit in seconds. Oxygen vanished so quickly that Japanese soldiers suffocated before the flames reached them. Those who survived the initial explosion tried to escape through the rear exits, only to be gunned down by Marine riflemen who had strategically positioned themselves for this very moment. Sergeant Meza turned the turret 30 degrees and targeted the second pillbox. This time, the defenders were prepared. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun fired at close range. The shell struck the frontal armor of the Sherman tank and ricocheted into the sky. The tank shook but kept moving forward. Carlson unleashed another burst, maintaining fire for 15 seconds until thick black smoke poured from every opening of the fortification. The third pillbox required a different approach. Its location behind a rocky outcropping made direct engagement impossible. Meza ordered Morrison to advance within 80 yards, dangerously close to Japanese infantry positions. As the tank climbed a small rise, Japanese soldiers appeared from hidden positions, rushing forward with satchel charges and magnetic mines. The tank's bowgunner opened fire with a .30 caliber machine gun, but several Japanese soldiers reached the vehicle's blind spot. This was when the modifications on the CB proved invaluable. Unlike standard flamethrower tanks that could only fire forward, the CBH-1 had full traverse capability. Carlson swung the turret 180 degrees and fired directly behind the tank. The attacking infantry were engulfed by a wall of flames that witnesses claimed resembled the gates of hell opening. With the third pillbox neutralized, Marines from the 21st Regiment advanced 400 yards in 2 hours, achieving more progress than they had made in the past 2 days. News spread quickly through the Marine communications network. The flamethrower tanks were effective. More importantly, they survived where conventional tanks had failed. Within 6 hours, all 8 flamethrower tanks were in action along the front. The tactical shift was both immediate and significant. Tank number 434, supporting the 23rd Marines near Eastboat Basin, destroyed 4 fortified positions in just one afternoon. The crew developed a technique known as corkscrew and burn. They approached targets in a spiral pattern to dodge anti-tank fire while maintaining a steady stream of flame. The psychological impact was as severe as the physical damage. Japanese soldiers, trained to fight to the death, started to flee when they saw the flame tanks approaching. They abandoned their fortifications rather than face being burned alive. Tank number 437 introduced breach and clear tactics with the 24th Marines. The flamethrower would first neutralize the defenders. Then, Marine engineers moved in with demolition charges to permanently destroy the fortifications. This approach proved highly effective against positions that had withstood days of regular assaults. In one afternoon, a single flame tank engineer team took out 7 bunkers that had halted an entire battalion's advance. However, it was tank number 432 that truly showcased the weapon's psychological power. Supporting the 26th Marines near the base of Mount Suribachi, the tank approached a network of interconnected caves. Commander Sergeant William Patterson instructed his driver to stop 100 yards from the cave entrances. Through the tank's periscope, Patterson saw Japanese soldiers watching from within the darkness. He unleashed a short burst of flame into the air as a demonstration. The immediate psychological effect was unmatched. Japanese soldiers started fleeing from the rear exits, abandoning their positions, which they had been ordered to defend to death. Marine riflemen were so taken aback that they initially did not fire on the retreating enemy. Within 30 minutes, an entire defensive area crumbled without the tank firing a single shot at the enemy. This marked the first mass abandonment of defensive positions in Japanese military history. By the evening of February 20th, Marine units were already adapting their tactics around the availability of flamethrower tanks. Attack plans were postponed until the flame tanks could be positioned. Infantry units learned to follow closely, just 50 yards behind the tanks. This distance allowed them to take advantage of the shock effect while being far enough away to avoid the heat blast, which could singe eyebrows from 30 yards. Artillery observers began marking targets specifically for the tanks. The use of flamethrower tanks changed the dynamics of combat. On the first day of their deployment, the results were impressive. There were 47 fortified positions obliterated. Marine casualties in the supported areas dropped by 40% compared to the previous day. The forces gained 600 yards of territory in locations that had seen no movement for 2 days. However, the most crucial change was psychological. For the first time, large numbers of Japanese soldiers were abandoning their posts instead of fighting to the death. In response, the Japanese acted quickly, but their efforts were mostly ineffective. General Kuribayashi issued urgent orders that night, marking the flamethrower tanks as top targets. All available 47mm anti-tank guns were instructed to focus their fire on these tanks. Special assault teams made up of volunteers were formed to attack while carrying explosive charges. Infantry units were told to aim for the vision blocks of the flamethrower tanks with concentrated rifle fire, hoping to blind the crews. Yet the main issue was still unresolvable. The flamethrower tanks looked just like regular Shermans until they fired. Japanese gunners could not recognize the priority targets until it was too late. Focusing on the flamethrower tanks left them vulnerable to the conventional tanks, which provided necessary cover fire. The Americans had gained a tactical advantage through mechanical innovation. On February 23rd, D+4, the day the Marines raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, the flamethrower tanks faced their biggest challenge. The 3rd Marine Division aimed to capture Hill 382, the second tallest point on Iwo Jima and a key part of Kiribayashi's northern defences. This hill was filled with bunkers and tunnels that reached 7 stories deep. Japanese defenders had targeted every access point with artillery and mortars. Engineers had made this position almost impossible to breach, featuring multiple lines of defense and intersecting fields of fire. The layout allowed defenders to emerge behind attackers. Previous assaults had failed with casualties over 50%. The 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, had lost 70% of its strength just trying to approach the hill. At 8 o'clock, 4 flamethrower tanks moved forward in echelon formation, supported by 6 standard Shermans and a battalion of Marine infantry. This time, the Japanese were prepared. They had hidden 75mm mountain guns, larger than the standard 47mm anti-tank guns. Weapons had been strategically placed to target flamethrower tanks. As the lead tank rose over the first incline, gunfire erupted from 3 hidden positions. The initial shot hit Tank 433's track, bringing it to a halt. Despite this, the crew continued to operate the flamethrower, creating a wall of flames that obscured the view for the vehicles behind them and kept Japanese positions suppressed. This act of bravery allowed the other tanks to navigate the battlefield. Tank 431 moved through the smoke, pressing on despite artillery fire that would have stalled an infantry attack. Shell fragments pounded against the armour like hailstones. The driver, Private First Class Morrison, later recalled using the periscope to navigate through smoke so thick that he could barely see 10 feet ahead, when Tank 434 was just 60 yards from the main Japanese bunker complex, its flamethrower ignited. However, the Japanese had made adaptations. Engineers had fitted steel plates over the bunker openings, which they could seal between machine gun bursts. The flames harmlessly splashed against the sealed steel. It seemed the Japanese had developed a counter to the flame tanks. Gunner Corporal Michael Rodriguez noted something important. The steel plates glowed cherry red after being exposed to continuous flames. That extreme heat would warp the metal and create openings. Rodriguez decided to maintain fire for 45 seconds, far exceeding the recommended time and dangerously depleting fuel reserves. The steel plate eventually buckled. The incendiary mixture streamed through the gaps, turning the inside of the bunker into a raging inferno. Ammunition exploded in a series of blasts. Concrete cracked due to thermal shock, and secondary explosions exposed the tunnel entrances that the Japanese engineers had hidden. Marine infantry charged forward with satchel charges, throwing explosives into every opening before the defenders could regroup. In just 3 hours, they breached Hill 382's outer defences. The once impregnable position was collapsing, but the battle also highlighted the flamethrower tank's limitations. Tank 431 ran out of fuel after only 80 seconds of continuous use. Refueling necessitated a withdrawal to specific areas where specialized fuel trucks were stationed, a process that took at least 2 hours. During that time, Japanese defenders could reinforce and regroup. The tanks were formidable, but they were not invincible. On that same day, Corporal Herschel Woody Williams showed that man-portable flamethrowers still held an essential role. When flamethrower tanks could not continue, he stepped in. Maneuvering through a narrow ravine known as the amphitheatre, Williams made his way on foot, carrying a 70-pound M22 flamethrower. During 4 hours of fighting, he was supported by just 4 riflemen, 2 of whom lost their lives protecting him. Williams managed to destroy 7 pillboxes that tanks could not access. His approach worked perfectly alongside the flame tanks. When tanks could not advance, brave soldiers with portable flamethrowers still pressed forward. His extraordinary actions that day earned him the Medal of Honor. He would eventually become the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II, passing away in June 2022 at the age of 98. His citation noted that he was quick to volunteer his services when our tanks were maneuvering vainly to open a lane for the infantry through the network of reinforced concrete, pillboxes, buried mines, and black volcanic sands. Corporal Williams boldly moved ahead alone to diminish the crippling machine gun fire coming from the entrenched positions. The statistics from the first week of combat illustrated a striking contrast. In areas where flamethrower tanks were deployed, Marine casualties decreased by 40% compared to unsupported assaults. Japanese strongholds that had resisted days of conventional attacks fell within hours. The 8 tanks consumed 70,000 gallons of fuel mixture over 7 days, destroying an estimated 300 fortified positions. The daily fuel consumption averaged 10,000 gallons, creating a logistical challenge that required the establishment of special fuel depots near the front lines. By early March, the battle had moved to Iwo Jima's northern plateau, a treacherous landscape of sulfur pits, twisted ravines, and volcanic rock formations that made tank operations nearly impossible. General Kuribayashi had strategically placed his last line of defense here, as the terrain favored the defenders. Marines, who faced 850 casualties taking a single hill, referred to the area as the meat grinder. Tanks trying to navigate the rough terrain either got stuck on sharp volcanic rocks or became immobilized by unseen obstacles buried under the ash. The flamethrower tanks adapted once more. Unable to move freely, they turned into mobile pillboxes, strategically positioned to support infantry advances. Marine engineers from the 5th Engineer Battalion worked through the night, constructing ramps and clearing paths, often under sniper fire, enabling flame tanks to access locations previously deemed unreachable. When direct assaults were out of the question, the tanks launched their attacks indirectly, sending flames bouncing off rocks to reach around corners and penetrate protected positions. On March 8, day 17 after landing, tank number 436 accomplished what the crews referred to as the impossible shot. As they aided the 9th Marines' assault on Cushman's Pocket, a network of caves and bunkers set into a steep cliff, Tank Commander Sergeant Daniel Foster figured that firing flames at maximum elevation might allow them to arc over the cliff and strike the Japanese positions from above. The calculations were tight. The CBH-1 flamethrower could elevate to 35 degrees, but reaching the target required a 40-degree angle. Foster directed his driver to maneuver the tank onto a heap of rubble made by naval bombardment, allowing the vehicle to tilt backward. With the tank teetering and enemy mortar rounds landing nearby, Gunner Corporal Anthony Vitelli activated the flamethrower. The molten napalm shot high into the sky, lingered for a brief moment at its peak, then cascaded down into the Japanese positions. The impact was catastrophic, both physically and psychologically. Japanese soldiers had thought their elevated positions were safe from flamethrowers. That belief was shattered in the flames. Reports indicated that some Japanese soldiers chose to leap from the cliffs to escape being burned alive, opting for death by fall over death by fire. By mid-March, the flamethrower tanks became central to a combined arms strategy. Each flame tank worked alongside a support team. Conventional tanks suppressed enemy anti-tank guns. Infantry provided close protection against suicide attackers. Engineers cleared obstacles, and ammunition carriers delivered the 300-gallon fuel trailers that extended operational time. This integration marked a significant change in assault tactics, shaping Marine Corps practices for years to come. The logistics for fuel alone demanded remarkable effort. Electricians mate Sekundas Kissel, one of the original designers, went to Iwo Jima to oversee maintenance. He reported that keeping the 8 tanks working required a supply chain that reached back to Pearl Harbor. Fuel mixing stations operated around the clock, blending diesel fuel, gasoline, and napalm powder in exact measures. The mixture had to be used within 72 hours, or it would separate and block the flame guns. Meanwhile, the Japanese response continued to adapt as well. They formed special teams dedicated to destroying tanks. Volunteers would charge into battle with explosive charges attached to their bodies. These human bombs found some success. On March 11th, tank number 438 was destroyed when a Japanese soldier detonated himself against its engine compartment, killing 3 of the 5 crew members. However, such tactics proved to be in vain. For every damaged flame tank, replacements arrived from the beach. Often, the damaged tanks were repaired and returned to action. General Kuribayashi, observing from his command bunker deep beneath the northern plateau, understood the strategic implications. In his final report to Imperial Headquarters, sent on March 17th, he stated, "The enemy's special flame tanks have shown to be more effective than all their artillery and aerial bombardment combined. They accomplish in minutes what conventional weapons cannot do in days. We have no effective counter for this weapon. The Americans have superior numbers and superior creativity. The situation escalated during the final week of March as Marines moved into the gorge, Kuribayashi's last stronghold. This twisted network of ravines and caves, nicknamed the Bloody Gorge by the Marines, represented the final challenge of American tactical innovation against Japanese defensive resolve. In a space less than 700 yards square, the remaining 3,000 Japanese defenders prepared for their last stand. On March 21st, D+30, all operational flamethrower tanks, 6 of the original 8 with 2 under repair, gathered for a coordinated assault. They were joined by 4 additional flame tanks rushed from Hawaii. Though these newer models used the less effective Ronson system, which had a range of only 60 to 80 yards, the assault would be the largest use of flame weapons in the Pacific War. Tank number 431, repaired after being disabled on Hill 382, led the charge. Its armor showed the scars of battle, with welded patches where shell fragments had pierced it and dents from numerous hits that had not penetrated, along with scorch marks from near misses. Tank number 433, with a makeshift track repair that made a distinctive clanking sound, took the left flank. Tanks 434, 436, and 437 formed the center, while tank number 432 secured the right. The assault began at 1000 hours, with the tanks advancing in a crescent formation. They created overlapping fields of flame, leaving no dead space for the Japanese defenders to exploit. Marine infantry followed in their wake. Troops launched white phosphorus grenades into cave entrances to mark targets for the flame tanks. Engineers then sealed positions with demolition charges after the flamethrowers had cleared them. The Japanese resistance remained fanatical, but it was becoming increasingly futile. Suicide squads rushed from concealed spider holes only to be incinerated before they could reach their targets. Anti-tank guns fired at point-blank range, with their crews continuing to shoot even as flames engulfed their positions. In one remarkable incident, a Japanese officer charged out of a bunker wielding a samurai sword, heading straight for tank number 434. The bow gunner hesitated, possibly due to shock or a sense of respect. This pause allowed Marine riflemen to shoot down the officer just yards from the tank. His sword was eventually recovered and sent to Marine Corps headquarters as a testament to the enemy's desperate bravery. By sunset on March 21st, the gorge had been breached. Over 800 Japanese defenders lay dead, many burned beyond recognition. The flamethrower tanks had consumed 8,000 gallons of fuel mixture in just one day, setting a record for the campaign. Marine casualties, although still significant at 92 killed and 257 wounded, were only a fraction of what it cost. Yet, the cost of victory was becoming evident on both sides. Tank crews reported intense psychological trauma from their involvement in the carnage. Corporal Carlson of Tank 431 later recounted, "You could hear them screaming when the flame hit, not for long, but you heard it sometimes at night. I still hear it. We did what we had to do, but I'll never forget the smell." Burning flesh mixed with sulfur from the volcanic rock. Maintenance crews discovered human remains fused to tank tracks, needing blowtorches to remove them. The tanks themselves were deteriorating from the relentless stress of combat. Transmissions failed under the strain of operating in volcanic ash. Fuel lines clogged with carbon deposits from the napalm mixture. Track pins sheared off due to the added weight of extra armor plates welded on for protection. By late March, maintaining even 4 operational tanks required scavenging parts from damaged vehicles. On March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared secure. The battle lasted 36 days instead of the anticipated 5. American casualties reached 26,038, including 6,821 fatalities. These numbers shocked both the American public and military leadership. Japanese losses were nearly total, with about 21,000 soldiers. Only 216 defenders survived as prisoners. The rest either died fighting or chose suicide as the battle progressed, preferring it over capture or death by fire. Flamethrower tanks changed the dynamics of combat. Analysis after the action estimated they reduced American casualties by about 5,000 men. These tanks destroyed over 1,000 fortified positions and used 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture. They also transformed Marine Corps assault tactics. Most importantly, they shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility in defensive positions. Captain Frank Caldwell, who commanded Company F, 26th Marines, gave a succinct assessment. He stated that it was the flamethrower tank more than any other support that won the battle. Artillery, naval gunfire, and air bombardment could not dislodge the Japanese from their underground fortifications. However, flamethrower tanks did what nothing else could achieve. Statistical analysis showed the true effects. More than 30% of Japanese casualties on Iwo Jima were due to flame weapons, both from tanks and portable units. In areas where flamethrower tanks operated, the rate of advance increased by 300% compared to unsupported attacks. The 216 Japanese prisoners taken were more than the total number captured in the battles of Tarawa, Saipan, and Peleliu combined. Many specifically mentioned fear of burning alive as their reason for surrendering. The tactical effects were significant beyond Iwo Jima. The Marine Corps immediately requested 54 more flamethrower tanks for future operations. Colonel Unn's team at Schofield Barracks ramped up production with AAA priority, the same level given to the B-29 bomber and the Manhattan Project. They developed an improved model, the CBH-2, with greater range and reliability. By June 1945, 70 new flame tanks were ready for Operation Downfall, the upcoming invasion of Japan. Observing Marine success at Iwo Jima, the Army expedited its own flamethrower tank program. The entire 713th Tank Battalion was converted to flame tanks for the Okinawa campaign. During the Battle of Okinawa from April to June 1945, Army flame tanks consumed 200,000 gallons of fuel mixture, proving just as effective against Japanese cave complexes in the southern part of the island. What began as a last-minute improvisation became standard equipment for Pacific operations. However, the strategic consequences extended beyond just battlefield tactics. Japanese military doctrine, refined over centuries, faced a disastrous defeat against American technological advancements. The flamethrower tanks were more than just a new weapon. They signified a shift in warfare from individual bravery to industrial strength. The production numbers tell that story well. Colonel Unmar's flame tank group produced 354 flame tanks by the end of the war. The CBS at Schofield Barracks created 226,343 gallons of flamethrower fuel. They built a mixing plant capable of producing 1,000 gallons per day. This industrial production spread across the Pacific, allowing American forces to literally burn through Japanese defenses. The creators of these weapons received little public acknowledgement. Machinist mate Reicher and electricians mate Kissel returned to civilian life after the war. Their names faded into obscurity. Colonel Unmar continued his work developing chemical weapons until retirement, with only a handful of military historians recognizing his contributions to victory. Their innovations saved thousands of American lives and shortened one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific War. Tank crews faced their own set of challenges. Many dealt with what would later be identified as post-traumatic stress disorder, the haunting memories of turning human beings to ash and the screams silenced by flames troubled those who followed their duty. Sergeant Mazer remained silent about his service until shortly before his death in 1993. He told his grandson, "We did what we had to do. No one should take pride in burning men alive, but those tanks did save many Marine lives. That is what I try to remember." Veterans of the flame tanks created an informal support network after the war. They gathered each year in Hawaii, returning to Schofield Barracks, where their weapons were developed. These reunions, overlooked by the media, gave the men a chance to share experiences too dreadful for those outside military life to comprehend. The last reunion took place in 2010. Attended by only 4 surviving crew members, the Japanese perspective gradually emerged through interrogations of prisoners and captured documents. Soldiers who had been taught that dying in battle ensured spiritual transcendence found themselves frozen in fear of being burned alive. The shame of retreating from combat seemed better than facing death in underground ovens. This psychological breakdown led to significant surrenders in Japanese military history. Lieutenant Yamada, who saw the first flamethrower tank attack on February 20th, ended up as one of the 216 prisoners. In his testimony to American intelligence officers after the war, he said, "We prepared for every kind of death bullets, shells, bayonets, starvation, but we were not ready for burning oil that sought us out in our deepest bunkers. The flame tanks crushed our spirit in ways that no regular weapon could. They turned our strongest asset, our underground fortifications, into our graves. Former Sergeant Masaru Hayashi, who was captured after being burned while trying to escape a bunker, shared vivid accounts. The napalm surged like a wave, filling every space. Men attempted to flee through emergency exits only to find more flames waiting for them. Some chose to shoot themselves rather than burn. Others dashed into American gunfire, favoring bullets over being incinerated. I witnessed warriors who had fought in China refuse to take positions when the flame tanks approached. This was not the death we had prepared for. The impact of the flamethrower tanks extended into the post-war era. The United States Marine Corps analyzed their success at Iwo Jima and fundamentally changed its assault strategies. They focused on combined arms tactics that integrated armor, infantry, and engineers. The idea of specialized armor for specific battlefield challenges became a standard military practice. Future weapons development would emphasize adaptability and innovation over sheer firepower. The technology itself continued to advance. The M4A3R3 Sherman flamethrower tanks were used in Korea, where they effectively targeted Chinese bunker complexes during the battles for the Punch Bowl and Heartbreak Ridge. Marine flame tanks destroyed over 300 Chinese positions during the Korean War, although the impact was less dramatic due to improved Chinese awareness of these weapons. The last American flame tank, the M132 armored flamethrower based on the M113 armored personnel carrier, remained in service until 1978. This marked the end of a lineage that began with 8 quickly modified Shermans in a secret warehouse in Hawaii. By this time, thermobaric weapons and precision-guided munitions had taken the place of flamethrowers as the primary method for overcoming fortified positions. International law eventually set restrictions on such weapons. The use of flamethrowers was governed by Protocol 3 of the Convention on certain conventional weapons that limit incendiary weapons. The weapon that proved decisive at Iwo Jima became contentious as public sentiment turned against what was seen as excessively cruel weapons. However, military historians point out an irony. The flamethrower tanks, despite their terror, helped to shorten the battle and likely saved thousands of lives that would have been lost in a traditional assault. The industrial achievement was significant. The United States manufactured 49,234 Sherman tanks during World War II. Out of these, only 354 were converted to flamethrower versions. Yet, those few hundred vehicles had an impact far greater than their numbers suggest. At Iwo Jima, just 8 tanks altered the course of a battle that could have dragged on for months and incurred tens of thousands of additional casualties. The production cost of around $200,000 per converted tank in 1945 seems minor compared to the lives saved. Military analysts estimated that each flamethrower tank at Iwo Jima potentially spared 625 American lives based on casualty rates in unsupported versus beds, flamethrower-supported attacks. In the harsh calculations of war, the investment in technology resulted in lives not lost. Perhaps the most significant legacy was psychological. The flamethrower tanks showed that technological advancements could conquer even the most passionate human resistance. The era of individual warrior skill was fading away, making way for a time when victory belonged to nations that excelled in industrial production and technological development. The noble samurai spirit could not withstand the liquid fire unleashed by mass-produced machines. In the volcanic soil of Iwo Jima, beneath memorials to bravery and sacrifice, lie the remains of over 20,000 Japanese soldiers who perished, defending positions they thought were impregnable. Many were incinerated by weapons they never thought possible. Their deaths not only marked the conclusion of a battle, but also signaled the end of a time when spiritual commitment could triumph over material inferiority. The 8M4A3 flamethrower tanks that engaged at Iwo Jima were ultimately machines. They were made of steel, aluminum, rubber, and mechanical parts assembled by workers who would never witness any combat. They embodied the mobilization of American industrial power, scientific progress, and mechanical ingenuity in pursuit of victory. The builders from the construction battalion, the Marines who operated them, and the Japanese soldiers who faced them were all part of a change that reshaped modern warfare. Today, the last surviving flamethrower tank from Iwo Jima resides in the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia. This tank, number 434, displays its battle scars. There are welding marks where the armor was repaired. dents from shell impacts and scratches from volcanic rock. A small plaque shares its specifications and battle history. However, it cannot capture the sound of compressed nitrogen releasing, the scent of burning napalm mixed with sulfur, or the horrific sight of liquid fire pouring like water into bunkers. Many visitors hurry past, troubled by the dark purpose of the weapon. Schoolchildren on field trips often question why anyone would create such a dreadful tool. Veterans who understand its significance linger longer. Some salute, while others simply stand in silent remembrance. For these veterans, the tank signifies not a glorification of war, but an acknowledgement of war's grim necessities. In 2015, the final reunion of Iwo Jima Flamethrower tank veterans took place on the battle's 70th anniversary. Only 3 crew members, all in their 90s, attended. They gathered at the museum to share memories with historians eager to document their first-hand stories. Corporal Anthony Vitelli, a former gunner on Tank 436, made a deeply insightful remark. He noted that when people ask if he feels proud of what they did, he believes pride is not the right term. He stated, "We did a terrible job that had to be done. Those tanks saved Marine lives. That's enough." Most of the men who designed, built and operated these vehicles have long since become part of history. Corporal Herschel Woody Williams, who fought alongside the flame tanks with his portable flamethrower, was the last Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima to pass away. He died in June 2022 at the age of 98. Along with him went the last living memory of the harsh reality of flame warfare. His foundation continues to honor Gold Star families, ensuring that the sacrifice of those who died is not forgotten. Colonel Unmar's classified reports, revealed in the 1970s, showcase the rapid pace of innovation that led to the creation of the flamethrower tanks. The construction battalion worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts beside their welding equipment. They achieved what traditional military procurement would have taken years to accomplish. Their reward was witnessing their invention succeed beyond all expectations, significantly shortening the conflict. The Pacific War included some of the most brutal battles. Japanese military archives opened in the 1980s provide insights into their experiences with flame tanks. Many reports describe the paralyzing fear as liquid fire advanced, knowing that concrete and steel offered no safety. Orders to hold positions until death seemed pointless when death arrived as flowing fire, seeking out every hiding spot. One report mentioned that flame tanks rendered their defensive advantages ineffective. Height meant nothing as fire could reach over barriers. Depth was irrelevant when flames poured into their tunnels. Reinforcements built to endure powerful explosions proved useless against liquid fire. General Kuribayashi's final message, sent just before his death in late March 1945, included a prophetic remark. The Americans did not just defeat them with greater numbers or firepower. They triumphed with superior creativity, turning their strongest asset, underground fortifications, into deadly traps. He foretold that future conflicts would favor nations that could envision new methods of warfare rather than those who merely refine traditional tactics. His insight proved true. The shift in military strategy that started with 8 flame tanks at Iwo Jima paved the way for guided missiles, precision weapons, and cyber warfare. The principle remained unchanged. Technological advancements overcame conventional strategies, and imagination prevailed over tradition. The shift from conventional warfare to flame warfare at Iwo Jima occurred in days but altered combat protocols forever. Marines trained in traditional assault methods adapted to work alongside flame tanks, leveraging their shock factor to breach previously considered impregnable defenses. This adaptation happened not through formal training, but through innovative battlefield responses that highlighted American military adaptability. Post-war statistical analysis showed remarkable trends in areas where flame tanks were deployed. Japanese defenders were 70% more likely to abandon their positions before being overrun. The psychological impact far surpassed the physical damage. Often, just the sight of flame tanks was enough to cause defensive breakdowns without a single shot being fired. One Marine intelligence report stated that the enemy's fear of flame tanks approached panic, with captured soldiers revealing that they refused orders to hold positions once flame tanks appeared nearby. The 8 flamethrower tanks of Iwo Jima accomplished something extraordinary. In just 36 days of battle, they introduced a new method of warfare, saved countless American lives, and played a vital role in securing victory in one of World War II's most significant conflicts. Their influence continued in every later war, where American troops faced entrenched foes, from Korea to Vietnam to Iraq. However, the moral dilemmas linger. Many tank crew members who survived grappled with their actions. The brutality of killing with fire and the mass destruction it caused challenged the traditional views of honorable warfare. These men were instruments of a grim necessity, using weapons that could reduce human beings to ash in mere moments. Some chose never to discuss their experiences, taking those haunting memories to their graves rather than imposing the horror on others. A poignant moment came during a reconciliation ceremony in 1985 on Iwo Jima. Former tank commander Robert Meza and former Lieutenant Koshi Yamada, who had witnessed the initial flamethrower tank attack, stood at the spot where Tank 431 had fired 40 years earlier. Yamada spoke through an interpreter. He expressed his hatred for 40 years, stating that the flame tanks had killed his friends in unforgettable ways. Yet he conveyed an understanding. War transforms us all into monsters. He acknowledged that both sides had done what they needed to do. Meza replied simply, emphasizing that they were just boys fighting to survive. He expressed gratitude that they both lived to be there that day. The two veterans embraced. As the sun set over Iwo Jima's black sand beaches, they walked side by side towards the memorial for all who had perished. Behind them, Mount Suribachi stood against the darkening sky. The island, once engulfed in fierce combat, had returned to tranquility. The era of the flamethrower tank started and ended in the Pacific, its legacy etched in fire across volcanic islands. 8 modified Shermans transformed warfare, proving that victory in modern conflicts belonged to nations that combined industrial strength with battlefield innovation. Though the flames had long since extinguished, their influence on military history remains, enduring. Ultimately, the Battle of Iwo Jima was not won by bravery alone, although there was plenty on both sides, but rather by the fusion of American industrial power and battlefield innovation. The flamethrower tanks epitomized the blend of technology, tactics, and resolve that would shape American military dominance for generations to follow. They were the tools of their era, necessary evils in a conflict that demanded complete victory. The Japanese defenders fought with unmatched bravery, following orders to resist until death. They constructed a powerful defensive position in the Pacific War, a subterranean fortress that traditional weapons could not dismantle. However, they did not foresee the incendiary weapons that poured down like molten rain, targeting every cave and bunker, turning their hidden refuge into a crematorium. Their defeat was not due to a lack of courage, but rather a clash with advanced technology and innovation. The figures illustrate the story with harsh clarity. 8 flamethrower tanks unleashed 360,000 gallons of fuel, destroying over 1,000 fortified positions, preventing an estimated 5,000 American casualties, and killing more than 6,000 Japanese soldiers with fire. The conflict lasted 36 days, which might have extended to months without flamethrowers. This is the math of modern warfare, where technological advantages directly correlate to saved lives and won battles. The volcanic island of Iwo Jima, now returned to Japan and renamed Ioto, shows few visible remnants of the fierce battle once fought on its land. Nature has reclaimed the battlefield, covering shell holes with greenery and filling trenches with volcanic soil. Yet beneath the surface, sealed caves and collapsed tunnels still contain the remains of soldiers lost to the flames. Their sacrifice is remembered by fewer living witnesses. General Holland Smith, commander of the 5th Amphibious Corps at Iwo Jima, once wrote in his memoir, "The flamethrower tanks made the difference between victory and disaster. Without them, we would have paid an unbearable price for every inch of that cursed island. They were dreadful weapons, but war is a terrible business. Ultimately, they saved more lives than any other weapon we used." The flames that engulfed Japanese positions on Iwo Jima have long since extinguished. The men who operated them have mostly faded into history. However, the revolution they sparked, shifting warfare from individual combat to technological superiority, continues to influence military strategies around the globe. In 8 modified Sherman tanks, America discovered the weapon that would shatter the impasse of the Pacific War's most formidable stronghold, forever altering the essence of warfare. The battle had ended. The war would soon follow. The echo of those flames and the sound of compressed nitrogen escaping will be remembered. The image of liquid fire pouring into underground fortresses and the screams abruptly silenced by searing heat will linger in military history. The era of the warrior came to a fiery conclusion on a volcanic island in the Pacific. A new era of technological warfare had started,